All right, let's dive into one of the most incredible, most explosive bursts of pure creativity in the entire history of science. And here's the thing. It didn't happen in some fancy university or a big, expensive lab. Nope. It all happened inside the mind of one young man working a totally forgettable job, completely invisible to the rest of the world.
And this whole story starts with a really fascinating puzzle. How does a young graduate, someone who's been forgotten and basically cast out by the very system he wanted to join,
how does that guy end up secretly rewriting the fundamental laws of the entire universe?
To understand that, our journey has to start not with a flash of genius, but with years of just bitter, grinding frustration. You see, before he was the icon we all know, Albert Einstein was, for all intents and purposes, a failure.
So he graduates in 1900, and you'd think things would take off, right? Not at all. The reality was pretty grim. He had this rebellious streak. He clashed with his professors, a guy named Heinrich Weber in particular, and he'd often just skip lectures to study physics on his own terms. Well, that came with a pretty steep price. He was the only student in his entire physics class who wasn't offered a position at the university. He was completely shut out, left sending desperate job applications all over Europe. And this wasn't just a few bad months, you know? This was 2 long, agonizing years. After graduating in 1900, it was just rejection after rejection. By 1901, he was barely scraping by, taking whatever tutoring jobs he could find. And then, in 1902, his professional life hit rock bottom, right as a huge personal crisis was unfolding.
I mean, things got so dire that his own father wrote this just humiliating letter to a famous chemist, Wilhelm Oswald, basically begging him to give his brilliant son a job. And the response? Crickets. Nothing. Oswald never even bothered to reply. What's absolutely wild is that years later, that very same professor would be the one to nominate Einstein for the Nobel Prize. Just incredible.
And while all this professional failure was happening, there was this secret, painful drama going on in his personal life. In 1902, his girlfriend, Mileva Maric, who was a brilliant physicist herself, gave birth to their daughter, Lizarl. Now, they weren't married, and back then that was a devastating scandal. The baby was apparently left with Mileva's family, and then she just vanishes from history. We have no idea what happened to her. His life really felt like it was falling apart from every angle.
But then, a lifeline. Right when things seemed as bleak as they could possibly be, a door opened. And it was in the most unexpected place you could imagine. He found his sanctuary in a patent office. So thanks to a friend, Einstein finally lands a job as a technical expert third class. Now on the surface, this was a total dead end for a theoretical physicist, but it turned out to be the biggest blessing in disguise. You see the work, evaluating people's patent applications, it forced him to think in really clear, practical ways. And the best part? It wasn't mentally exhausting. It left him with tons of time and energy to secretly work on his own revolutionary ideas, what he called his theoretical physics contraband.
He couldn't get into academia, so you know what he did? He made his own. He and 2 friends started this little club they playfully called the Olympia Academy. They just hang out in his tiny apartment, debating the biggest questions in science and philosophy, sharpening each other's minds. This was the intellectual community, the peer review that the universities had denied it. So, all of this, the boring day job, the late-night debates with his friends, the years of just quiet, focused thinking, it was all starting to converge. It was all building up to one single, absolutely monumental year, his annus mirabilis. His miracle year.
The year is 1905. Just picture it. Einstein is 26 years old. He's a husband, a new father, and a third-class patent clerk. And he is about to change the world forever. Okay, get this. Between March and September of that year, he publishes 4 papers. Any single one of these would have made a physicist's career. First, in March, he basically helps launch quantum mechanics by proposing that light isn't a wave but comes in little packets of energy called quanta. Then, in May, he provides the first real mathematical proof that atoms actually exist. In June, he completely upends centuries of physics with special relativity, declaring that time and space aren't absolute, they're relative. And then, as a little addendum to that paper, almost like an afterthought,
he gives us the most famous equation in history, E equals mc squared. He showed the world that mass and energy are 2 sides of the same coin, that mass is just an incredibly concentrated form of energy. In 6 months, from his desk at the patent office, this 26-year-old had completely rewritten the rules of reality.
So obviously the scientific world just erupted, right? The professors who rejected him must have been absolutely stunned. Well, the reality was a lot more ironic. It was a revolution that, at first, pretty much nobody noticed.
So did the world of physics, the academic establishment that had shut him out for years, did they finally wake up and pay attention?
The shocking answer is no. Almost no one. His papers were out there, sure, but he was a complete nobody. He didn't have a fancy title or a famous university backing him up. To most people, his ideas were just too strange, too radical to even be taken seriously.
I mean, the gap between what he achieved and what he got for it is just mind-boggling. On one hand, he had rewritten the foundations of physics, and on the other, well, his own university actually rejected his paper on relativity as a PhD thesis. His only real reward in 1906 was a tiny promotion at his day job, from technical expert third class to second class. That was.
So here's the key takeaway. In total obscurity, while working a normal day job, he had single-handedly kicked off a scientific revolution. But the world just wasn't ready to listen yet. Recognition was not going to come overnight.
And that leaves us with this incredible, tantalizing cliffhanger. The revolution had already happened, but it happened in silence. So what happens when the world finally catches up? What happens when everyone finally realizes that the most important, most famous scientist on the entire planet is a humble patent clerk?